Hello, everyone. This is the final and the fifth talk from the first phase of our collective project, Pandemic Resilient Cities. My name is Amani Alshaaban, and I have with me Michele Di Marco, the CEO of Emergency Architecture and Human Rights, and I am from Think Fast, a collective urban response to COVID-19. In the past month, we have interviewed key practitioners from the fields of the built environment and the public health sector to discuss four main topics: pandemics and disasters, health infrastructure, urban living and density, and contested cities and human rights. We have picked these four topics as we trust that all of them require an interdisciplinary approach of analysis, discussion, and action. And within these four areas of discussion manifests the major gaps in the debate around human rights. By now, the complexity of the socio-economic and socio-political aspects of the pandemic's outbreak are undeniable and clear to all of us. We are witnessing a massive confrontation of global inequality, marginalization, and injustice. And many around the world are envisioning a better recovery, building back better, or a new normal, as it's being called, of this slow and transformative disaster. Having said that, the idea of the manifesto started as a combined interest in merging one of our main outputs from our platform, Think Fast, a collective urban response to COVID-19, and already existing manifesto on architecture is a human right. That was developed by Emergency Architecture and Human Rights, I think in 2018. Together, we believe that the statement of architecture as a human right shall be amended and expanded to accommodate the complexity of the urban and the gaps in our discipline that were highly exposed during the pandemic.
Thank you, Amani, for the presentation. And we believe that it's a time for architects, urban designer, planner, and the practitioners of the building environment to collaborate with other professionals from different backgrounds in a multidisciplinary manner and take a stance regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. We know this crisis is not just a matter of public health, but a crisis at the very core of the cities we have built, strongly linked to the socio-economic development system we have chosen. It is time to imagine the city to come, assuming our role as a mediator between spatial, political, economical, and social dimension, and our duty to promote social justice and human rights in cities. So as you were saying, Amani, like previously, in 2018, during the Copenhagen Architecture Festival, Emergency Architecture and Human Rights asked the university, institution, professional to collectively develop the Manifesto Architecture is a Human Right, trying to join the reformatory aim of the Bauhaus, saying that architecture is science, art, and craft at the service of the society, in the beautiful document of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that established the basic principle of coexisting for every human being. In the light of the ongoing health crisis that we are all currently facing, EHR, along with Think Fast, a collective urban response to COVID-19, acknowledge that the previous statement should be updated. So together we believe that the world we live in and the way we design, plan, build city must adapt and develop positively during and after the overcome the crisis. Building our resilience to pandemic and health crisis should not be a luxury of few, but the right of everyone. So COVID-19 and in general pandemic respect no border. And this pandemic is a terrifying wake-up call for the world. The short reflection, you will see in the collective video that we will show you in a bit, together with the discussion we had in the previous talk, will be a fundamental part of our collective manifesto on pandemic resilient city. So on the first talk, if you saw all of them, we hope that you saw all of them. If you remember, for example, we discussed with Stephen O'Brien, former United Nations Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, and Luca Fontana, epidemiologist from WHO, on how new kind of mitigation infrastructure will look like, and how a multidisciplinary approach, including the humanitarian, health, and building environment sector, could help mitigate future pandemic. On the second one, the second talk instead, we discussed with Professor Jeffrey Lazarus from the Barcelona Institute for Global Health, together with Anna Silenzi from WHO, on how to rethink health infrastructure in cities and the role of architect and planner in creating pandemic resilient city and health facilities. So what we can extract from this current pandemic and discussion we had over the last few months is that all that show once again that dense and fragmented cities are the product of rapid urbanization, and that urban health has been negatively impacted by social, economic, and spatial urban segregation. These two aspects turn city into hotspot for spread of the virus. That this time is the COVID-19, next time will be another one. It's not the last time, and we should be aware of this. So this is a clearly an urban crisis in need of an urgent systemic approach. So more than anything, COVID-19 has brought out the extreme inequality from which we have built and developed our city and health facilities. So envisioning a post-pandemic city and resilient health infrastructure is a challenge to everybody, to all of us. To ensure to leave anyone behind, we need more equality, not just in the health sector, but also in access to water, job opportunity, access to dignified shelter, safe and health cities, and transportation. So all aspects contained in this beautiful document I was mentioned before, called Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Thank you, Michele. And I will go from this reflection to reflect on the last two sessions when we have discussed urban living and density and pandemics, and the other one about contested cities and human rights. The fourth speakers brought in so many valuable reflections that I will bring only a few. The first reflection or the first take is on scale, the specialization of the outbreak and the correlation between the hotspots on one side and the lockdown on the other side in terms of diameter of movement. I think there's a lot to learn here. First, going into a deep analysis of the hotspot and what are the main characteristics, social, political, economic, environmental aspects that create these relations between the hotspots in these cities. Which spaces in the cities were saved because of their socio-economic status and which are not? Who managed to stay safe and who did not manage to stay safe? This understanding exposed marginalization and inequality and exposed the shortcoming of planning, not only spatially, but economically and politically. And this is the question of density in cities. The second parameter is the diameter of movement during the lockdown. For example, in my city, we were allowed to do 10 minutes walking distance from the home to access essential services. And what is essential services and who get to access the essential services? In some locations, we are debating that some people could not access essential services within the 10 minutes walking distance. In others, they had the provision of essential services as wash, as hygiene spaces, in informal settlements that were within or the walking distance that exposed people to the pandemic. And here our speakers brought in the debate of density and housing provision. It has been repeatedly described across literature that housing is also livelihood opportunities and socio-political status. So the issue of density is not physical, rather socio-economic and socio-political. And from this one, I would go to the second take from these reflections of our speakers, which is the debate of eligibility and enablement, and the political meaning of both terminologies. And in addition, as the additional layer of vulnerability that was added through the pandemic to those who are already marginalized, either because of their socioeconomic status or because of their political status or caused by political segregation. The question here is who's eligible to what services and who is able to protect themselves and to protect those around them, who is to be sacrificed, whose life matter and whose life doesn't matter during the pandemic. The major, these questions of eligibility and enablement, um, they are in the core of the human rights question and in the core of the human rights debate. And our cities should at least enable us to be safe, at least. And in addition to that, and in relation to fragile context, I would also take the idea of eligibility to the shift in the conflict dynamics and in the shift of the power dynamics that were caused by the conflict, about authoritarianism and how do they use the conflict as a tool to marginalize people or to add on their vulnerability, and who got the power to decide who's eligible to what service. We have seen in the fourth and the third talk examples of a new emerging political leaders. They are religious leaders, or you have some non-state actors coming out and becoming gaining eligibility in their community. And and within these shifts in the dynamics of the conflict, and within these shifts in the power dynamic between state actors and non-state actors, comes the debate of who is deciding who's eligible or not, who's deciding on whose life worth living and whose life could be sacrificed for the benefit of everyone. And this also to be extended to how authoritarian system in settler colonial context are exploiting already marginalized population through the pandemic, as we're seeing in the occupied land of Palestine or in Syria or in any other context around us. And then shifting from that, there was another reflection and more of a worry from our speakers about the reconfiguration of distance and space, especially in the Western thinking of public space or living spaces in our cities. We're seeing now many public parks are being divided for people around Europe and the global north. But how does that manifest in areas where public space is barely existing in some locations as the public park in the meaning of the European vision or the Western vision of public space? It's our role to differentiate between what is happening in the north and what kind of thoughts we need to take in, and what kind of approaches we need to take in when we talk about the manifestation of social distancing in a space, especially in the global south, in high dense urban areas, in areas where marginalized groups don't have the luxury of enjoying a public park and so on. And to keep it short, lastly, it is also all of these factors bring us to the tracing of the root causes of the outbreak and the relation between the hotspots and natural resources, the relation between our cities and the wild, which in many studies we have seen that the outbreak and pandemics and new diseases are coming from the over exploitation of natural resources, and with also massive consideration of climate change as one of the main causes of the shifts in of our ecosystem. and and this like transformative disaster. It shifts from one crisis to another crisis to another crisis, starts with a pandemic to economic crisis to social crisis to, and now we're talking about the spatial crisis. within all of this, we don't have answers, but we should be aware of the possibility of analyzing, and how our role as practitioners is to look deeper into the causes of the pandemic, and to the causes of inequality, of the causes of excluding people from being eligible or being able to protect themselves and their communities. And with this final reflection, I would like to go to the open call that we have launched a couple of weeks ago, asking practitioners from all over the world to answer one question, which is short but not simple. What does a pandemic resilient city means to you? We asked people to record a short video of no more than 20 seconds answering this question, sharing their opinion on what what is the new normal? How do we envision a pandemic resilient cities? How do we think these cities should operate? How do we move, socialize, organize ourselves? And what is the role of practitioners to achieve this vision? And I would like to thank, on my behalf, and Think Fast team, and Michele as well, everyone who have participated, and we have combined everything in one short video that we would like to play with you in a second.
Hola a todos y a todas. Bueno, frente a su pregunta de cómo me imagino la ciudad, creo que la ciudad del futuro, la ciudad que nos espera, va a ser una ciudad construida colaborativamente, una ciudad para el cuidado, en que se recupere la escala humana, que se ponga en el centro de las personas, que recuperemos los espacios para encontrarnos y para movernos de manera sustentable. Una ciudad regenerativa en que volvamos a conectarnos con nuestra naturaleza, pero también con la naturaleza del planeta. Y eso, una ciudad muy bella en la que todos podamos compartir, que todos podamos construir juntos y que todos podamos adaptar para futuros desafíos como lo que es la pandemia o lo que se venga con el cambio climático.
Cities are meant to be dynamic and places of interaction. In order to co-create a resilient pandemic city, we must not forget that and reinforce our shared values and local economies. By we, I mean not only practitioners and decision makers, but every global citizen which has a strong voice in this. Thank you.
It will have to be a city with functional and social diversity, because we have seen how in recent years gentrification over tourism and financialization of housing aggravated social territorial inequalities, dismembering the local community networks and putting social sustainability at risk.
My hope or my advice to practitioners is that we stand reasonably still in the moment. If we've learned anything of pandemics in history, is that we cannot foresee their arrival or the form that they will take. So preemptive measures as ideas of this kind of pandemic resilient city are really slippery slopes, and we quickly find ourselves exposing our privacy through new technological solutions, apps, our own mobility through smart city designs, or even our democratic access to open public spaces. So we need to be aware, and I think standing still and observing is smart for a little while.
It means to have decentralized and safe accessibility to essential services such as groceries and hospitals. It means to have a pedestrian and bike-friendly infrastructure network at the neighborhood scale, which can easily connect to the city scale. And most importantly for me, it means that we have to work on social solidarity and social cohesion, starting all the way from the community level.
A pandemic resilient city is one where public spaces are highly flexible. This means that whenever there's an event like a crisis, whether it's a disease or a man made disaster, this can be easily adapted to whatever might come. But these spaces must be also usable during everyday life. Therefore, a pandemic resilient city must be able to adapt and to conceal the different uses of space.
Many institutional and office buildings will lay vacant even after the pandemic is over because people will keep on working from home as a new normal. We need to think of these buildings and their future. We need to think of adaptive reuses.
A pandemic resilient city should have all physical infrastructures that can quickly adapt to a new urban life that reduces risk for the vulnerable city dwellers from getting infected. And it should also be able to run autonomously so that it can ensure food security and self-generated energy.
For a pandemic resilient city, and a city that is resilient against all kinds of shocks and threats for that matter, what is needed is transformations that are more informed from the grassroots. Planners, development practitioners, and governments all need to take a much closer look at what is happening on the ground and figure out ways to support and nurture the efforts of different communities.
I don't want to stay at home anymore. I want to go to school. I want an open studying space where we can not only study but also interact with our friends while maintaining social distancing. To ensure the safety of students, maybe we could have a protective dome and proper flooring. Thank you.
So to conclude, also after we show like this short video coming from practitioners from all over the world, like we can say that the COVID-19 outbreak brings out the urgent need to rethink the idea of primary or basic services, as this is the core of the inequality and segregation, as we were saying before. So we state that space is the possibility to keep distance from each other. And therefore, a certain scale and density of publicly accessible space is not a luxury anymore, but a primary need. So in the same way, housing provision understood only in quantitative terms is not enough. The same way access to water has been over the years qualified is not any water, but safe water, is not any house, but a safe house. And at the same time, and at the same, of course, apply on wash facilities. So furthermore, like the right to the city linked with access to citizenship, inclusion, and spatial integration of displaced or migrant community should be put in the center of the discussion. And now I will repeat again. So this should not be seen as an optative anymore, but as a basic human right.
And to add to that, we also believe that in order to overcome these challenges and crises and this disaster, we need to make use of the human capacity to work collectively and share knowledge. Communities across the globe are organizing themselves one way or another, bringing a unique approach to the provision of care and solidarity, as we have seen in the past months. And us practitioners must be aware of our role and positionality in all of this. Be humble and learn from these approaches, be attentive and creative in proposing new scenarios, and adapt our approaches accordingly to develop a pandemic resilient city. Based on this, we have established Think Fast, a collective urban response to COVID-19 platform. It's an online platform newly emerged and came as or with the aim of bringing together practitioners from the built environment, public health, and other relevant sectors who are dealing with different aspects of the crisis on the ground and across the globe, to collectively think across sectors in the ways and possibilities for us to overcome the crisis and build back better, develop our practice, and support our communities. Through the dialogues and discussions, we have learned the importance of developing a manifesto on pandemic resilient cities collectively and openly, hoping that it will be useful for practitioners on the field during the recovery phase. And we, us, and emergency architecture and the human rights, we only believe that all of this, or moving forward or building better, it's only possible through the active consideration of a human rights. in the discipline of development planning, accompanied with institutional support of the process. And therefore, we are calling for practitioners to join us and support in shifting the planning paradigm. Nevertheless, and finally, and this is where I finish my final remarks, we should remember that it's our responsibility as architects and planning practitioners to truly leave no one behind. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Amani, for the nice conclusion of this talk 5 of the talk on pandemic resilient city. And like to conclude also, like I would like to invite, as we say, like our manifesto, it's a collective manifesto. So we are going to make also in collaboration with the Copenhagen Architecture Festival, like a seminar it's the continuation of these talks here in Copenhagen. And the seminar the one-day seminar will be followed by a collective workshop where we are going to invite practitioners from different backgrounds in different disciplines, and write together with us the manifesto on pandemic resilient cities. Thank you.